Fairy Ilona and Argelus. There was once a king who had 3 sons. And the king had an apple tree that yielded golden apples. Strange tree that it was. Every night it blossomed and apples grew ripe on it. This increased the king's treasury so that he was the richest king in the whole world. One day, however, while the king was taking his usual walk in his beautiful garden, he found that the apples were gone from the tree. This happened the next day too, and the following day, and the one after that. The king called his court together and announced that if he found anyone who could successfully guard his apples, he would give him half his fortune. They only had to hear this for all the guards to go and stand by the apple tree. But it was to no avail. They all fell asleep at midnight, and when they awoke, less than 15 minutes later, all of the golden apples had disappeared. During the next council, the 3 princes announced that they would guard the apple tree. First, the oldest tried, but the same thing happened to him as to the other guards. The second prince fared no better. At last, the youngest prince, Argelus, volunteered. First, he stuck a golden case of tobacco into his pocket and then sat down under the apple tree. The moon was shining brightly. Prince Argelus soon began to feel that his eyes were about to close. He quickly took a sniff of the tobacco, rubbed his eyes and sneezed several times. Then he took a second sniff and rubbed his eyes again. All of a sudden, he heard light rustling sounds. He looked up and saw 12 ravens flying overhead. They were heading straight towards the apple tree. The certain raven, their leader, was in front, and Argelus grabbed hold of its feet and shouted, "I have caught you, thief!" But when he looked, he saw that a beautiful girl lay in his arms. Her golden locks covered her lovely white shoulders. "Who are you, beautiful thief?" asked the prince. "I shall never let you go." "I am Fairy Ilona," said the lovely girl, "and these ravens are my girlfriends. Every night we fly here for fun and pick the golden apples. But I can't stay with you, although I will admit that I shall never be able to forget you, for it is only you that I love." "Stay with me," pleaded Argelus. "I can't," answered Fairy Ilona, "but I promise that from now on I shall come every day, and I shall never again steal the apples. Always be here if you want to see me." Then with a great fluttering, 13 ravens flew away. The next day the entire court saw with amazement that all of the apples were still on the tree. The king kissed his son on the forehead. Argelus asked only that his father permit him to continue guarding the apple tree. Every night Argelus went to guard the apple tree so that he could see Fairy Ilona. But in the king's court there was an old witch who was keeping an eye on Prince Argelus. The king also became curious as to why Argelus was so eager to guard the apple tree. He called in the old witch and said to her, "I see that you are watching Prince Argelus. Watch him more carefully, especially when he guards the apple tree." The old witch did as she was told. When Argelus went to guard the apple tree, she hid behind the bushes. Early in the morning she reported to the king. "I watched Prince Argelus. I saw him sit beneath the apple tree with a beautiful girl. She came to the tree as a raven and turned into a golden-haired girl." "You are lying, old witch," said the king. "That's not true." "But it is, your majesty. If you wish, I shall bring proof tomorrow that I'm telling the truth." Argelus and Fairy Ilona were together again that evening. They themselves didn't know how it happened, but they both fell asleep. While they slept, the old witch came over to them and cut off one of Fairy Ilona's beautiful golden locks. Then she crept away. When Fairy Ilona awoke, she began to weep. This woke Argelus up too. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" "Oh, Argelus, live happily. I shall never see you again. I can't stay here with you, for thieves live in your house. Look, they have cut a lock from my golden hair." She embraced Argelus, pulled a ring from her finger, and put it on one of Argelus's fingers. "Here is my ring," she said. "I shall recognize you anywhere with it." Then she clapped her hands, turned into a raven, and flew away. In the morning the old witch showed the king the golden lock of hair. The king, surprised, sent for Prince Argelus. "My son, I have married off your brothers, and I think that the time has come for you to marry too. I have found a rich princess for you, and I do not believe that you'll have any objections. Father dear, I will marry, but only the girl I choose, and I have already found her. Fairy Ilona shall be my bride." The king wasn't pleased with his answer, but he tried in vain to talk Argelus out of his decision. Argelus put on his sword and went off to find Fairy Ilona. The entire court fell into mourning for him. He covered almost the whole world, but he couldn't find Fairy Ilona anywhere. One day he came to a small house in which there lived an old woman. He greeted her politely. The old woman, sitting on a chair, asked Argelus in some surprise, "What are you doing here, where even the birds don't fly?" "Old woman," said Argelus, "can you tell me where Fairy Ilona lives?" "No, I can't, my boy. But if my husband, the sun, comes home, he'll tell you, for he shines everywhere. Now you'd better hide, because he will devour you if he finds you." Argelus hid. When the sun came home and stepped into the room, the first thing he said was, "Fee, fi, fo, woman! There's a man in here." At that, Argelus climbed out from under the bed and greeted the sun pleasantly. "It's lucky for you that you greeted me so nicely," said the sun, "or else I would have devoured you. I can't tell you anything about Fairy Ilona, but perhaps my brother, the moon, will know something." So Argelus went to see the moon. The same thing happened as in the sun's house, and the moon sent him to the wind. Argelus went to the wind, greeted him pleasantly, and asked if he knew anything about Fairy Ilona. "Me?" said the wind. "I know nothing. But in the forest, not far from here, lives the king of animals. Perhaps he'll know something." Once again Argelus went on. He walked so long that night fell and he couldn't see anything. He climbed up a tree and looked around in search of some light. Far in the distance, he noticed a faint glow coming from a beautiful castle. He went to the castle and knocked on the gate. The door opened and a giant stood before him, a giant with one eye in the middle of his forehead. "Good evening, Your Majesty," Argelus greeted him. "Could you possibly tell me something about Fairy Ilona? Do you know where she lives?" "It's a lucky thing for you that you greeted me so politely, or else that would have been the end of you. I am the king of animals. I know nothing about Fairy Ilona, but perhaps one of my animals can tell you something." He whistled once, and the palace was suddenly full of every kind of animal. The king asked the animals, but none of them could answer anything. At last, a limp wolf came forward. "I know something about Fairy Ilona," said the limp wolf. "She lives beyond the midnight sea, where they broke my leg." "Then take this poor prince there," said the king. The wolf went over to Argelus and stood so that the prince could get on his back. They traveled like this for a very long time. Suddenly, the wolf put Argelus down. "I cannot carry you any further. You find your way by yourself. It's not really so far." And with that, the wolf bade him farewell and limped away. Argelus went on and on until all at once he saw a valley surrounded by 3 mountains. 3 devils were arguing in the valley. He went up to them and asked what they were arguing about. "Our father died and left us this cape, whip, and these sandals. If you put on the cape and sandals and swing the whip once, all you have to say is, 'Hi-ho, let me be where I want to go,' and you'll be there. We can't agree on who gets what." "Well," said Argelus, "if this is all that's troubling you, I shall divide these objects among you. Each of you go climb one of the mountains." The devils climbed the mountains. Argelus put on the cape and sandals, swung the whip and said, "Hi-ho, let me be where I want to go, by Fairy Ilona's side." A second later, he stood before a crystal-clear palace. One of Fairy Ilona's girlfriends happened to be looking out of the window. She recognized Argelus and ran to Fairy Ilona. "Here comes Argelus!" Fairy Ilona thought that she was just teasing her and slapped her face. Then came the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, the 11th, and they all met the same fate as the first one. Argelus knocked on the door. An old woman came to open it. She looked at Argelus with amazement, which soon changed to happiness. "Oh, but it's good that you're here, Argelus. You will free our princess at last." "You can't go to her now. You can't be with her now because of the mean magician. Only at midnight can she move about freely." And then, if you kiss her 3 times, the magician will have no more power over her. It's a good thing that you came just now, because the magician is not at home. Otherwise it would have been the end of you. I'm not afraid of him, said Argelus. I'll fight it out with him. The old woman invited Argelus into the house. She made him a bed of silk and prepared him a magnificent supper. Then she said, "Don't fall asleep, because Fairy Ilona comes here every night at midnight." But the old woman was an evil witch. She had a whistle which she blew if she wanted anyone to fall asleep. She took out her whistle, turned around, and blew on it. Argelus fell into such a deep sleep that he didn't know anything. At midnight Fairy Ilona came, and when she saw her beloved one, she cried out, "Wake up, my dearest! If you kiss me 3 times, I shall be free of the magician's power." But Argelus didn't wake up. In the morning, the old witch said to him, "Fairy Ilona was here, but you were sound asleep." This happened the next night too, and the one after that. But once, when the old witch was snoozing, Argelus noticed the whistle around her neck. Out of curiosity, he took it and blew on it. He saw that all the servants suddenly fell asleep. So he realized why he was always in such a deep sleep. The old witch was using the whistle. He hung the whistle around his own neck, and whenever the old witch began to awaken, he blew on it. He kept it up till midnight. Then, when Fairy Ilona came, Argelus kissed her 3 times. Immediately, the entire castle lit up, the doors all opened, and the ground swallowed up the old witch. Before Argelus kissed Fairy Ilona again, he hit her in the face 11 times. This is because you slapped your 11 playmates when they told you the truth. I deserve it. Then Argelus took Fairy Ilona in his arms, put on the cape and sandals, and swung the whip. "Hi-ho, let me be where I want to go, in my father's palace." An instant later, they were there. Argelus became a great king, and Ilona a great fairy. And they lived happily ever after.